Or has it been America that has been containing China? And if somebody want to contain you, what are you going to do? Lie down and say, rape me? What do you do? Rather, my question is, why were the Germans there in the 19th century? Why were the French, the British, the Americans, the Russians, why are they there? I can find it for you. It's historic fact. If you have a problem with facts, then end of discussion. So China say, put yourself in the Chinese position. You guys messed it up in the Carter administration, in the Clinton administration, in the Bush II administration. And now you have to find somebody to blame, and so you blame me. Why should I listen to you? Do you know that they tapped telephones before 1997 by the British? Regularly. Even the list of names came up. One of them is on my board. So you think the Brits are saints?
Mr. Chan, a few weeks ago, our Beijing correspondent wrote in a Spiegel cover story about China, "This is the end of an era in which the global centers of power were clearly defined and the leading role of the US has never been questioned." Would you share this analysis?
Would I share this assessment? First of all, you have 1.38 billion people in China, call it 1.4. They were very poor 30-some years ago. So for them to seek a better living is a very natural thing for anybody anywhere in the world. And after 40 years of pretty bad history, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, they finally figure out and decide to change their ways with the help of Deng Xiaoping. And so the rise of China is an inevitability. As Henry Kissinger says, for 3,000 years, China was at the height of human civilization. When Europeans, not my word, Henry's, when Europeans were still living in caves, China was already at the height of civilization, and that's true. Now, the last 200 years, China was really down and out. So much so that Hong Kong was taken by Britain from 10,000 miles away. And so for China today to rise is an inevitability back to the trend line of history of 3,000 years. Could 200 years of bad history reverse 3,000 years of glorious history? Probably not.
But what he was talking about was not just economic growth. We have been used to economic growth in incredible figures in China for decades now. What he's talking about is that in addition to this amazing economic growth, there is now a new political ambition which became visible for just some time ago. So I think when he was speaking about the end of an era, this was more in a political or geopolitical aspect, he meant it.
The reality of human history is that you can never totally divorce economics from politics. Economics will always bring political power. And political power is necessary to keep your economic growth. So get used to it. When you have a big country like China, 1.4 billion people rising economically, it is absolutely natural that political power will accompany the economic power. If not, you will not be able to maintain that growth. I cite you an example. China, 20% of the energy need is imported. Right now, not quite that much, but very soon it'll be 20%. So how many of you have watched a movie called Captain Phillips? Tom Hanks, you know that movie? Good, young people have watched it. So imagine a Chinese ship, a tanker, coming out of the Gulf of Hormuz, met some Somalia bandits. They couldn't tell the difference between Captain Phillips and Captain Chan. And they go after the Captain Chan ship. What are you going to do? How do you protect your energy security? Would you call the 7th Fleet of the United States and say, please help? Don't forget, 1996, 2 aircraft carriers from the United States 7th Fleet Navy parked outside of Taiwan, and there's nothing. Clinton sent them there. There's nothing China could do in 1996. That woke up the Chinese and say, wow, there's just two battles, two aircraft carriers from America. And America has 14 of them, by the way. Two of them, the whole of China can do nothing. And so would they call the Seventh Fleet if they mistake you for Captain Phillips? So no choice but to have a navy in order to protect your security of energy, right?
Sure, but in the West we've got the impression that now from the need of protection, having a navy, an army, there is a new political will under Xi Jinping to play a certain role on an international level. Is there any moment for you, a specific moment you could pinpoint when these political ambitions of China became clear in the near past?
I don't think that you can pinpoint a time. Perhaps the 1996 two aircraft carrier sent by Clinton, President Clinton, was as close to it as ever. That woke up the Chinese. You have no choice but to protect your own economic interest. But that said, China is evolving gradually economically, and the political and military need to protect your economic interests will grow together with the economic rise. So the question rather should be posed to the United States. What kind of relationship do you want to have with China? If you want to have a good relationship with China, China can easily become more like Japan. Although, by the way, Japan has the second largest defense budget in the world. Okay, so it's up to the United States what kind of a world of tomorrow you want. China is just doing what is necessary.
We got the impression that last autumn something happened.
So Ronnie, was that 19th Party Congress, was that a watershed in the history of China in the sense that, you know, we have returned to our rightful sort of stature in the community of nations, and we're no longer going to stick to that policy of, you know, reluctance and hiding our true intentions?
The answer is a very simple one. Deng Xiaoping said that, meaning that we have to hide ourselves, don't stick out your head, right? Just buckle down and do your own thing. That is at a day and age when China was very poor. Its reliance on international affairs is very limited. So of course you do that, don't cause trouble. But as I said, now two things happen. Number one, China's economy is so integrated with the rest of the world. Energy, as I mentioned, also there's food security. And so there is the need that stems from economics, number one. Number two, you have the United States. The United States, everywhere the Chinese turn, Africa, Latin America, Middle East, everywhere you go, America just slapped you on the face. That is just a fact. Just check history of the last 30 years, in particular the last 20 years. So the Chinese say, hey, how do we defend ourselves? We have no choice but to take measures that is commensurate with our economic prowess today. So the fact that Xi Jinping enunciated that doesn't mean that it happened that day. It's such a simple-minded way of looking at things that it happened that day, it changed everything. No, there is 30 years of economic development before that gradually drive China into a position where it's so totally dependent in the rest of the world. And America acting in its own way that the Chinese feel very threatened. So eventually, you have no choice but to have a statement such as what Xi Jinping has said.
So it's Chinese foreign policy, as you said, about economic interests. It's also about containing the US. I'm trying to paraphrase you here. But it seems to me that there is also an additional element. What he said at the Party Congress was that he believes it's high time for China to transform itself into a mighty force that could lead the world on political, economic, military, and environmental issues. So could you tell us what exactly he has in mind? What are those projects that he's talking about?
You know, you mentioned about China containing the United States. Does China have the ability to contain the United States? Or has it been America that has been containing China? And if somebody wants to contain you, what are you going to do? Lie down and say, rape me? What do? You have to do what is necessary for your own people. Of course. So, I think you asked the wrong question. It is not China who is containing the United States. It's the United States who is trying to contain China.
Point taken.
So China has no choice but to react, respond. Then to your other question about what it means. Well, if you're a big guy like China, there are certain responsibilities. Mm-hmm. And in fact, a lot of people are accusing China today for not taking enough international responsibility. So China tried to take some international responsibility, then you come around and say, hey, what's your intention? No-win situation. Such is the world. Wake up, grow up, get used to it. That's the real politique, like it or not. The only thing you can do is be strong enough to protect yourself, economically, militarily, and otherwise, right?
Right.
So China is doing any other country would do, except that China is a big country. I walk into any room, nobody notice. I'm 1.6 meters. Nobody would notice me. But if I'm Yao Ming, you know Yao Ming? 2.26 meters, the basketball player, NBA. He walk into any room, he'll be noticed. Like it or not, China is Yao Ming, 1.4 billion people. So whatever they do is in the limelight. They cannot hide like I can. So get used to it. There is a LeBron James, Yao Ming, Shaq O'Neal in the world scene today.
And if I were to press you to give us 3 important projects, be it in the realm of politics, be it in the realm of military engagement or economic, in the economic field, what would those 3 projects be?
Projects.
In terms of China, I mean, what was he talking about in concrete terms?
I would say number 1, energy security. Number 2, food security. Number 3, be a respected member of the international community. That would be my 3. Mm. Any problem with that?
I didn't get your point. Are you denying that something visibly changed in autumn during this 19th Party Congress, or would you share the fact that Xi Jinping, with what he said, there is a development leading to this point, but there was something really said and heard which wasn't said and heard before. Would you agree on that or not?
If there is something, I don't know what it is. Because America has been moving in a particular direction now for, 15, 20 years, if you like containing China. So I suppose you can cross a threshold and get to the next phase. Is that the case? I don't know. What do I know? But what I do know is that there has been a gradual deterioration of the relationship between the United States and China. Mm-hmm. And the reason is very simple. The United States want to contain China.
Okay.
So you have to do your best to protect yourself, that's all.
An American journalist from the New York Times, but being correspondent in Beijing, Edward Wong, just wrote this month that from trade to internet, from higher education to Hollywood, China is shaping the world in ways that people have only begun to grasp. What is your impression? Do you think the West is aware enough of these epochal changes happening?
Whether they are or not is one issue. What is changing is, in actuality, is another thing. Years ago, I gave a speech that says that by China's being weak and out of the international community, because they were so poor and communistic, foolishly, a lot of internal strife and problems, they deprive mankind of 20% of the human ingenuity, creativity, intellectual prowess in the world. China has about 19-20% of the world's population, right? And so you never see anything. How many of you have watched a Chinese movie 20 years ago? How many of you have heard of a Chinese artist or a Chinese musician? Hardly. Because China was poor and out of sync with the rest of the world. But today, as China is economically integrated into the global community, as it gets a little wealthier, surely it will unleash the creativity and artistic expression of 1.4 billion people. In that sense, you will be watching movies from China. You will be listening to Chinese artists playing. You will be going to galleries with Chinese painters. These are inevitable things, which I think is wonderful. Why not? So I think that China will, no question, contribute much more to the global community in many, many fields.
Let's change a little bit the topic. For a country that claims the word social in its state's doctrine, social issues appear somewhat absent from Chinese policy imaginations of great power status.
What do you mean by social?
Social to behave in a socialistic way.
They are not behaving in a socialistic way?
That's my question. Oh. President Xi also vowed that China would be making greater contributions to mankind in the coming years. So what could this be?
Well, as I mentioned to you, some Chinese movie will likely win the Oscar one of these days. That would be a contribution.
Mm-hmm. One.
I listened to Daniel Barenboim with Dr. Paulson the other day, and I saw him over breakfast the next morning at the same hotel. I almost went up to him and asked, have you heard of a young pianist by the name of Wang Yujia? Any of you have heard of the pianist by the name of Wang Yujia? No? No. You will. She records for Deutsche Grammophon. She was a Gilmore Young Artist recipient 2012 or something like that. So you will be hearing these names. There is a student of mine in Berlin by the name of Ning Feng, who is a violinist. Last time I heard him play was in the Rathaus here in Hamburg, when Helmut Schmidt was there, and the then premier of China, Wen Jiabao, was there. So they will contribute in many, many ways.
But these now you are telling about cultural or art. Or music. I mean, there are still other. It's beautiful and necessary, absolutely. But there are still other great responsibilities, and
such as
making the world a better one.
Good.
Doing your part to have a clean environment.
Good.
Respect things you're not respecting, perhaps up to now in China.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Let's take some of those as an example.
Yeah.
Who have been more contributing to African nations in the last 20 years? Mm-hmm. The Europeans were colonialists in the old days. I made a mistake of saying to the king of Belgium one time, I used the word Congo. The Chinese just traded with Africa. They have their problem, I know that. Especially the private companies. The state-owned enterprises are far better, by the way. And so the model of economic development that China has just underwent in the last 30 years, in my opinion and that of many economists, is far more akin to the condition of many developing economies, such as in Africa and in other parts of the world. And so China can be a great model for a lot of these economies to learn from.
For the African economies?
Yes, or in poorer economies in general. You talk about the green, the environmental issue. In 1974, when I was entering MBA school, as you mentioned, Nora, I was in Southern California, Claremont Graduate University, and I was driving up the hill. I cannot see the hill in front of me, because in 1973-74, Los Angeles was such a disaster in the environment. I have photograph here, 1952, London. Remember that? People have to wear masks on the street. So 1952, Britain. 1972, 73, Los Angeles. Now you have 2017, China. Economic development will produce a lot of terrible effects to the environment unless you are really enlightened. But it's not enough to be enlightened. You also need money. George Shultz asked me, George Shultz, the former Secretary of State of Ronald Reagan, asked me maybe 15 years ago, how come China does not build electric cars? All electric cars. I said, good, wonderful idea. 50, 20 years ago, China does not have the technology even for combustion cars, let alone electric cars. So I said, George, if you want China to do that, who's going to pay? 15, 20 years ago, China was poor. You want them to build all electric cars, and at that time, electric cars are not as efficient as it is today. Are you willing to pay? I shut them up. If the West want China to take care of the environment when they were still poor, who's going to pay? Now, let me tell you something also. Today, I can assure you, the leaders in Beijing are far more enlightened than the leaders in Washington, D.C. concerning the environment. Now, let me tell you something also. Let me tell you also something. You know the U.S. Green Building Council? They take care of building, make sure that they are green, right? The first shopping center that has gold standard of U.S. Green Building Council, what country is it in? China.
Does it start with a C? Yes.
Second one, China. Third one, China. Fourth, fifth, sixth, China. The fact that they're all done by my company is coincidental, okay?
I think that point is definitely taken, Ronnie. But let's come back to the sort of with great power comes great responsibility thing. You talked a lot about the environment and what China does to protect it. A different issue that comes to mind is migration, which is a global concern. Now, could you imagine that China takes in refugees from, say, Syria or other parts of the Middle East, or even closer to home, maybe from Myanmar? Is that an issue where China could also show responsibility?
First of all, I'm not sure if anybody has asked. Why don't you try?
So if they did, what would be China's response?
I don't know. But I do know history. 1,000 years ago, there were tens of thousands of Jews, at that time refugees. Where did they end up? Nobody took them. China did. 500 years ago, there were 300,000 Arabs in southern China. What did China do to them? Welcome them. In fact, sorry to mention this, but in Second World War, when the Jews were persecuted in this country, the Brits did not take them. They traveled all the way to Hong Kong. They met a British colony, don't accept them. They went to Shanghai, China took them. the first place that somebody will take the Jewish refugee was China.
So that's an historical example, and that's much appreciated. But let's talk about the present.
That's why I suggest you ask them if they would take them. Because China is very big. China is the most populated country in the world. Will they accept? I don't know. I know what your country would do. I don't know what China would do.
What would you advise China to do?
Depends on the situation. Hypothetical questions are not as meaningful.
Still.
I don't know. I really don't know the answer. So all I can do is tell you what history has been.
The title of these discussions is The World in Disorder or World Order Under Pressure. And I think there's enormous amount of uncertainty regarding the current world order. But there are some things perhaps we can agree on. One is China has arrived or is in the process of arriving on the great power stage. The second is the Western-dominated order is changing, is in crisis, possibly crumbling. Do you see a relation between the 2 points? Is perhaps one point favoring the other one?
What do you mean by 1 point?
The second one of the Western world in disorder, making the role of China on the international scene even bigger than it was possible before.
Whether the West is in disorder or not, the rise of a big country like China, no choice, will change the world order. You don't need to intentionally change anything. Your presence will change everything. Today's trade of China is about the same as that of the United States. So the two of them has trade of what? 4 trillion, 5 trillion a piece, import, export, add together. And so, you know, when you are that big, you will change the world whether you like it or not. The answer rather, the question rather is the rest of the world willing to accept that 1.4 billion people want to better their livelihood? Is that legitimate? So the question should not be addressed to me. The question should be addressed to ladies and gentlemen in the audience.
What is your impression? How is the West reacting to this rise of China and to its will to play, apparently, a new role on the political scene?
I have my worries. And the reason is the following. The West have been strong for the last 400 years, 500 years, since Renaissance. And China has been waning for the last 200-300 years. And it is never easy to accept a new player. And today, the West is very ideological. In particular, sorry, Thomas, Germany. I talked to journalists from Süddeutsche, Frankfurter Gemeinde, and the French, wherever. No other journalists are as ideological as that of the German newspaper that I know. I never talked to Der Spiegel, Peter. Maybe you're better.
No, we're not at all.
But whatever it is, you know, let me tell you this. I'll answer it this way. I was in Frankfurt. I was in Hamburg one time, and Angela Merkel was speaking, and 4 or 5 times in her speech, she said, shared value. Shared value. Helmut Schmidt was sitting on stage with her. I was sitting on the first few rows. I raised my hand to ask a question when it's Q&A time. Of course, they would not pick a Chinaman. So I was not picked, but let me tell you what my question was. And I told Helmut Schmidt later. I said, my question was, Chancellor Merkel, you keep using the word shared value. I live in China. Am I supposed to share your value? By saying so, now no one is suggesting that you should give up your value. By all means, keep your good value. But by saying so, you draw a line on the sand. I am on this side, you may be on the other side. If you don't share my value, you are not one of my own. Keep your value, but why say it? By saying it, you are dividing the world. Good
Later on, I think we will speak about the Chinese policy to impose values or to have a free discussion in Europe.
We never impose it outside of our border.
Yeah,
You
I
do.
don't know.
You do.
Yes.
The West do. Can you learn not to impose your value on other countries?
But perhaps there are values to share.
Ronnie, talking about values, imposing values, let's look at the role that the US is currently playing, a country that you said is among the most self-righteous countries in world history. At the same time, what we see in Washington right now is a pullback from Washington's international responsibility as the leader of the free world. You spend a lot of time in the US yourself. You're engaged in a lot of think tank activities in the US. What is your sense? Where does Washington stand these days? And also, how is that stature perceived in Beijing, for that matter?
First of all, let's not blame Donald Trump for everything. He should be blamed for many things, but not everything. Isolationism in America did not start with Donald Trump. In fact, I asked the following question. All of you know the origin of the United States, 1776 and so forth. Was America founded on internationalization, or was it founded on isolationism?
Yeah.
Think about it. What's Monroe Doctrine? Right? 1820-some. All those tells us that America from day one is an isolationism country, not an internationalism country. The fact that you and I live our whole life in the post-World War II era, where America was originally reluctantly pulled into the international scene, does not mean that America historically was an internationalism country. In fact, roughly only 1/3 of its history, particularly after dragged into the Second World War, is the United States, an internationalist. So for America to go back to isolationism should not surprise any of us. And no other country that I can think of can survive as an isolated country. The United States is the only one. Somebody said, oh, maybe Russia can. I said, no, Russia cannot. Russia may not need to import anything, but it needs to export gas, natural gas. So even Russia cannot be totally isolationist and survive. The only country that I can think of is the United States. 2 oceans on 2 sides, small Canada on the north, Mexico in the south, not a threat to Russia, to the United States economically or militarily. So America can easily go back to isolationism. And I do worry that America has that tendency always. And so let's not be too surprised if America moved toward isolationism. I don't like it. But what can I do? And I do fear that America, especially now with Trump in the White House, may be moving the country further in isolationism, which I don't think is necessarily good for the world.
And that means that China has to take on more responsibility, fill that vacuum.
Well, China never want to be number one because China always was number one for 3,000 years. Then the last 200 years become number nothing. A couple thousand British soldiers took over China. In Shanghai, where my mother grew up, in Shanghai, in the parks, there's a sign that says, no dogs and Chinese. This is in your home. What would you like, Britta? You go home, in your bedroom, there's a sign that says, no dogs and Britta. That's exactly what the colonialists did to China. And so, you know, China has this terrible history of the last couple hundred years of under oppression by the West. 22,000 soldiers in 1900, 8 nations defeated the whole of China, from Europeans mostly, except the United States. So China is today just want to be back to the global scene as a responsible and respected member of the international community. How much responsibility you want them to take? It depends. So far, they are the most business-oriented country that I know. They try to keep their hand off all the politics and so forth. Middle East, they try to get out of it. They don't want to touch it, right? Do you want China to take more responsibility? If you do, then let me assure you, somebody will say, see, China is overextended itself, it exerting its influence around the world. So the Chinese say, to hell with it. No win situation, we just do what we want to do.
Those who are visiting China these days and even if they can't read Mandarin, they have to consider that there are a lot of books and written works on the end of the West. Would you subscribe to this theory? Are we already living in a kind of post-Western order?
Not at all. You cannot prevent somebody from being foolish, especially on the internet. You have foolish people in this country. China has tons of it, just that they have many times more people.
You wouldn't agree
that's
on
all.
that. We're not a system yet.
Well, Ronnie, if I may, since we're talking about, China's rise or China having risen to great power status, here's a question that I received from the audience, and let me read it to you. Given China's treatment of Uyghurs, Tibetans, and dissidents, do you sympathize with those who fear the rise of China?
Well, if you are the Uyghurs, I can certainly understand. Because of historic reasons, the northwestern part of China, Xinjiang province in particular, has always been a mixed area between the Uyghurs and the Han people, which comprise 92% of the Chinese population. It has always been a mixed area. My sister-in-law come from there. And so, but mind you about something, and that is Xinjiang province, together with Tibet, has always been contested by the Russians, the British, the French, even the Americans, and certainly the Germans as well. The great game of the 19th century. Why is that the case? Well, everybody is after something, either defensively or offensively. There's a lot of natural resources in that part of the world. Most of the big rivers in India start from Tibet. And so the great game, now, you say, why are the Chinese, in Xinjiang province and Tibet province? Because they have been that way for the last couple thousands of years. Rather, my question is, why were the Germans there in the 19th century? Why were the French, the British, the Americans, the Russians, why are they there? So, such is human affairs. China is no saint. Neither Americans, nor British, or French, nor German, Nobody is a saint. Everybody is after his own interest.
So there are reasons to be concerned about China's rise. That's what you're saying.
Of course there is. Who would be so naive to think that a big guy like China with 1.4 billion people rising, people would not be worried? right? So the question is not whether, what I do object to is irrational fear. Fear is understandable. Irrational fear is terrible. I asked some questions in the last 3.5 days since I've been in Germany, and I've been talking to a lot of think tank people. I asked them simple facts, and they don't know the facts. And yet they are so, shall I say, irrationally fear of China. Let's get the facts right first.
Talking about getting facts right, here comes your favorite question, Ronnie. Let's talk a little bit about the South China Sea, which is, for all intents and purposes, one of the flashpoints, not only between China and its neighbors, but also in China, in Chinese-American relations. Now, you know, what a lot of people find hard, not only in the West, but also in China's neighborhood, is to square that rhetoric of China's peaceful rise with actions in the South China Sea. Land reclamations, building military bases on those artificial islands. How does that go together?
Very simple. First of all, Japan in 1945 has to give back all the territory that it has taken from its neighbors. Who did Japan give all those islands back to? Spratly and Paracel. Who to? China.
And that is the Chinese version of history.
No, that's not the Chinese version. That's historic facts. The United States 7th Fleet accompanied the Chinese, whatever navy that they had at the time. It is, you want the name of the captain of the American ships that sailed to protect the Chinese Navy? I can find it for you. It's historic fact. If you have a problem with facts, then end of discussion. The fact, I go to America a lot. In America, you talk to anybody who is in the know in Washington, D.C. They would know that those islands were all given back to China, escorted by the 7th Fleet Navy of the United States. Why? In the 50s, they negotiated with the North Korean. At that time, they were buddy-buddy, good friends. They gave some of the islands to the Vietnamese. The rest of it lie there for 70 years. Why did China not do anything for 60 years until now?
Why?
There's an island north of Taiwan. Only, I don't know how far it is, I forgot. Very close. It has been disputed. It's called the Diaoyu Island, or the Japanese call it the Senkaku Island. The Chinese call it the Diaoyu Island. In the Cairo Declaration, at the end of the Second World War, that island, together with the whole of the Ryukyu, were given back to China. Chiang Kai-shek, the leader of China at the time, were busy fighting Mao Zedong, the communist. So he said to the American, let's co-administer it. Then he lost a war to Mao Zedong. Do you think that America will give it to communist China? So America took it. In 1972, if I get my dates right, gave all that to Japan. China contested, so they agreed to disagree. Diaoyu Island, let's leave it to the next generation, according to Deng Xiaoping. Let's leave it to the next generation to resolve it. For now, we'll agree to disagree. About 4 years ago, Japan announced unilaterally that they bought it from the owner of the island, the occupier of the island, whatever it is. They nationalized it. What did America say? Nothing. In fact, after the Japanese unilaterally took it, the Japanese foreign minister, the Australian foreign minister, and John Kerry at that time, the Secretary of State in the United States, the three of them had a press conference that says, we oppose any change to the status quo. What status quo? Before or after the Japanese unilaterally nationalized it? Of course it's after, because the press conference was held afterwards. So the United States cannot say that this thing belonged to Japan because they know what it says in Cairo Declaration. And don't say that it's not fact. Just go back to the Cairo Declaration and read it. And so, Japan unilaterally took that island. So China did not dispute it, or they disputed it, but there's nothing they can do. Have you ever come across your mind that if you pick on a big guy, or you pick on a guy like me, there's not much consequences. I'm a small guy. If I'm a big guy like that young man did, there's consequences. And China is a big guy. You take that island from China unilaterally, and America said nothing about it. So the Chinese said, okay, you do this, I do that. You react one way, you act one way, I react another way.
And Ronnie, just because China is such a big guy, wouldn't it be a responsible behavior for a country, a global country such as China is, to build trust rather than to sort of pour even more gasoline into the fire in a region which is, even without these tensions, already quite tense?
Pardon my language. You expect a big guy to lie down and say, rape me?
I would expect a big guy to try and build confidence.
Why do they need to build confidence? Just because you blackmail them and take their bedroom? Or steal whatever from them? And they say, oh, I build trust. You can take anything you want from me. Come to my house, take whatever you want. I am here to build trust. Which country would do that? Why do you expect that of China?
But other countries would consider legitimate claims from the neighbors for the situation is not as clear as you might see or interpret it.
Do you know that in the 1960s, there was a German radio station that wrote to Manila and said, can I build a broadcasting station on this island? And Manila wrote back and said, we don't own it. Now Manila claims that they own that island. In the 1970s, you check history. Before 1970s, none of those nations in the South China Sea surrounding claim any of that stuff. It is in the 70s when China was undergoing the Cultural Revolution. China was weak, China was in trouble. The pack of hyenas all come up, and there was oil discovered. There's a lot of natural resources, fishery and so forth. Mm-hmm. Suddenly everyone wanted to claim. But why did the United States 7th Fleet escorted the Chinese Navy to take back all that island in 1945? You tell me, please. Why? Mm-hmm. They don't own it?
I can't tell you.
Then please consider it.
I think, yeah, we could perhaps speak another hour about the South China Sea. You have a very explicit point of view on that.
America, no, anybody in the know, including David Petraeus, my friend, by the way, ask them about South China Sea, not an issue. Why? They know the facts. Unlike what I saw here in Germany in the last 3 days. I'm sorry. Mm-hmm.
We will observe the future of the South China Sea. There is a very big initiative, project China is shaping, and it's changing our current order already, the One Belt, One Road initiative, $900 billion. A lot of Western partners observe it with, we would say, perhaps suspicion. The German Foreign Minister Sigmar Gabriel said concerning the One Belt and One Road...
Which country's foreign minister?
German.
I'm sorry, I apologize.
Germany's foreign minister. He said that the problem concerning the One Belt, One Road initiative is not China having a strategy, but the West lacking a strategy. Would you agree on that?
Yeah, he put it in a very interesting way. Mm-hmm. The reality is, what is the Belt and Road Initiative? The Belt and Road Initiative is nothing more than the Silk Road of 2,000 years ago. 2,000 years ago, the Silk Road has two parts, the sea road and the land link. Mm-hmm. The one belt is a terrestrial link. The sea route, or sea road, if you will, is what it is. And the Silk Road in the old days has those two parts. In fact, there's more along the water than there were on land, the old Silk Road. Today, which part of the world is the least globalized? The Silk Road was the beginning of globalization as we understand it today, right? So which part of the world is the least globalized in the whole wide world today? Now, I travel 70% of the time. I go to, I don't know, Armenia, Georgia, Kazakhstan, wherever, Turkey, Israel. The most not, or I should say the least globalized part of the world is perhaps Central Asia. I go to Africa, it's pretty globalized. I go to Latin America, pretty globalized. Central Asia. So sooner or later, whether the Chinese raise this issue of Belt and Road Initiative, call it whatever you want, New Silk Road, whatever, somebody will figure that one out and say that is a part of the world that is not globalized, that ought to be globalized. On the one hand, to do trade so that we can open more new market. On the other hand, hopefully it will benefit the livelihood of the local people as well. So the Belt and Road Initiative, Xi Jinping mentioned it. If you didn't mention it, that's your problem. China mentioned it, but no country can own the Silk Road. You can own whatever is within your border. That which is beyond is none of yours. That's where you collaborate and trade and do business together. So I think that the Belt and Road Initiative to the Chinese makes a lot of sense, economically and politically.
So would you agree that it's also a geopolitical project disguised as an economic one?
No, it's very economic as well as political. Why do you have to segregate the two? You cannot segregate the two. Mm-hmm. Economics and politics, at the end of the day, is all together. So consider the fact that China needs energy, as I mentioned, right? Energy security. A lot of those countries on the New Silk Road are rich in energy, right? Mm-hmm. Azerbaijan, Russia, Kazakhstan, that whole area, Turkmenistan, the whole area, Iran. So China, it makes a lot of sense economically to be friendly with those countries to ensure a steady supply of energy. Russia has a lot of it, but as we all know, just talk to my Ukrainian friends, Russia is not necessarily the most reliable. And they negotiated with the Russian for 15 years and they couldn't get a gas deal until America and the West, you guys, begin to sanction Russia, and suddenly Russia struck a deal with China. Mm-hmm. But everyone knows Russia, is it that reliable? Think twice. So China needs to diversify its energy sources. And so it is very economic. Of course, it's political too, because, all those countries, a lot of them are Muslim countries. China has a domestic Muslim population. By having good relationship with those countries, hopefully you will have less of a problem domestically. You mentioned the Uyghurs. So geopolitical, geoeconomic, it makes sense for China. And by the way, it makes sense for the local countries as well. The former Prime Minister of Pakistan said to me last year, $39 billion is already into Pakistan to build roads, the corridor, For China, it makes a lot of geopolitical and geoeconomic sense. And so, but then for Pakistan, you got roads, you got railroads, you got ports. Why not? Everybody wins.
Everybody wins. That's sort of the buzzword. Let's look at the far end of the Silk Road from a Beijing perspective for a moment. Europe. The Chinese have increasingly turned to Europe when it comes to international cooperation. Emmanuel Macron, the French president, went to Beijing a couple of days ago, and he brought a very nice black horse with him from the Republican Guard as a gift to Xi Jinping. So one of the questions that people ask themselves here in Germany, but also probably in other parts of Europe, is who is Beijing's key interlocutor in Europe? Is it Angela Merkel or is it Emmanuel Macron?
That's a dangerous question. The answer is simple. Whoever wants to be a friend. If Germany wants to be a friend, for example, in the old days, Helmut Kohl's days, every year he'd take a big delegation to China. Even Schroeder did some of that, right? Recognizing the economic opportunities.
Merkel did too.
Merkel did too, okay. So if you want to be a friend of China, China is more than happy to be a friend of yours. They need a lot of things. They need your technology, your precision tools. There are many things that you have that they want or need. In the case of Germany, it's more they need, such as precision tools. What France has is what they want, such as red wine.
Louis Vuitton handbags.
Right? Handbags, whatever, right?
Yeah.
So whoever wants to be friends with the Chinese will be friends with you.
So you don't see any change within the political framework inside Europe?
It's up to you.
No, you as a trading and negotiating partner.
No, it's a trading partner. Whoever wants to trade, they will trade.
I mean, is there, with the arrival of Emmanuel Macron in France, is this changing anything for you?
It depends on how Beijing look at Macron and hence his government. If there are ulterior motive that the Chinese detect, of course they'll be a little bit more cautious. But I think that so far, from what I can tell, a lot of it is basically trade related. And China being a big country, the United States always like to, slap trade sanctions on everybody. Perhaps another one is coming, right? As you indicated that Xi Jinping and Donald Trump had a phone call. So Europe is a big market. 600 million people, very wealthy, buy a lot of goods and can supply a lot of necessary or desirable goods to the Chinese. They're happy to trade with you.
They're happy to trade with us Europeans. They may also may or may not be happy to collaborate with us on international issues such as the North Korean nuclear issue, where Europe plays a minor role for all intents and purposes. Let me ask another question, Ronnie, which comes from the audience concerning Beijing's role in the DPRK nuclear crisis. Which concrete steps do you think can Beijing take to escalate tensions with North Korea?
Escalate tensions?
To de-escalate.
Oh, de-escalate.
No, God forbid.
Please escalate.
First of all, let me tell you what I think China look at the whole situation. In the last 40 years, America refused to talk to DPRK. America is just too proud. During the Carter days, they had a diplomatic solution possible. Carter, last minute, canceled it. Under Clinton, same thing. Under George W., same thing. Every time there is a diplomatic solution, and Americans will be the first to admit that, America, last minute, all mess it up. Each time they miss a diplomatic solution, you ratchet the game in the wrong direction. Nobody in the neighborhood, I don't know about Russia, but nobody else, Japan, Korea, China, United States, none of them, Canada, none of them want a nuclear North Korea. The wind blows the wrong way, the Chinese is hurt. Nobody wants it. So every time the Americans miss a diplomatic solution, that the Kim family and the North Korean begin to do more in the wrong direction for the nuclear weapons. So now, suddenly you have a situation where North Korea is basically a nuclear state, like it or not. And one of the top leaders in America had admitted to me in my office that you may as well treat them as a nuclear state. The only thing is he would not say that when he testified in the US Congress, okay? But he's right. And how can you blame that young kid? If Gaddafi has nuclear weapon, he may still be alive today. So that young man, he's not stupid. So far he has played his cards very well.
And endangers world peace in a very significant way.
Right. You better believe it. And so America got it wrong each time. And then finally they are confronting with a nuclear state in North Korea. So they have to find somebody to blame. Who to blame? China. Easy target. Every sin in the world is because of China. And so, North Korea, blame it on China. What can China do? Mind you something. China's end game for North Korea is exactly the opposite of what America wants. America doesn't care if tomorrow North Korea disappeared. China would not want it because China doesn't want a US army at the Yalu River between North Korea and China.
So it's a buffer.
Right, they want a buffer. So they want to keep the country there. America doesn't care. Get rid of them. So much better. And America is very good at it. Regime change is a specialty of the United States. And only the United States have the power to do that. At last count that I have come up with from public sources, 50 times perhaps in Second World War, public information. So China say, put yourself in the Chinese position. You guys messed it up in the Carter administration, in the Clinton administration, in the Bush II administration. And now you have to find somebody to blame, and so you blame me. Why should I listen to you? And by the way, we have a different end game. And so they say, hey, my American friends in Washington, D.C. said, why don't they just turn off the tap for the gasoline? So you want to freeze 5 million North Koreans to death? The Chinese say, hey, these are my friends. I want them around. Why do I want to freeze them? And the Chinese, whatever you say about the communist China, they remember their friends. And the Kim dynasty have been their friends for the last 60, 70 years.
And a bit of an unruly friend, wouldn't you say?
Maybe so. America has a lot of unruly friends as well.
That's true.
Is America a saint? Anybody a saint here, ladies and gentlemen? Now, mind you also, if China does not supply energy, how do you assure that Russia does not supply energy? Do you know who is the most important ambassador in Pyongyang? Anybody know? The Russians, exactly. So America is just looking for a scapegoat for all the diplomatic mistakes that it has made in the last 40 years. And so now blame it on China.
But Ronnie, wouldn't you say that the DPRK issue could also be an opportunity for Beijing to be taken to, gain some international profile as a country that helps to resolve... Why do they need to gain
international profile?
Well, I think they could prove that they're able to take the lead on resolving a very serious international crisis in a constructive way. I think that would be a good thing to do.
When you're dealing with America, who mess it up again and again and again and again, you're telling China to say, all are forgiven. All the diplomatic mistakes that America made in North Korea are forgiven. We want to be nice to everybody, a big smile. Is that what you want China to be? And mind you, China, as I said, have a very different end game as the United States. So China is big enough to say, I do what I think is proper and right. Let history judge.
In his book on China, Henry Kissinger, who you know very well, warns that one of the biggest dangers to peace in the 21st century will be the clash between Chinese and American exceptionalism. Are Washington and Beijing doing enough to avoid an escalation?
First of all, I'm pretty sanguine about the US-China relations. I don't think it's that dangerous, for simple reasons. America has been doing foolish things vis-a-vis China, in my opinion, in the last 20 years. But you need two parties to get a divorce. China doesn't want to have a divorce. China is a beneficiary of the post-World War II global system, including the trading system. America shoulder all the problems in the world. Wonderful. China will be very happy to hide behind the United States. And so, I remember that time I was with Merkel and Henry Kissinger here in Germany. And an Indian economist and I were sharing we're just a minor speaker in a small session on Asian economy. He said to me, China is buying oil, gas, and mineral, and this and that everywhere, coal. We India are doing exactly the same, but we're just so happy that China is in the front, China is bigger, China is buying more, so all the blame go to China, which is true. China like to do the same thing with the United States. Let you take care of, be the police, you solve all those problems, right? You bear all the responsibility, and we just support you. But don't make us number one. I gave a talk one time with Kevin Rudd. I said, China, in my opinion, is very happy to play second fiddle to the United States in international affairs. Sitting in the front row was a Chinese ambassador to the United States. This is in Washington, D.C., in the Kay Adams Hotel, many of you know, just in front of the White House. And so I said, my opinion, China is very happy to play second fiddle to the United States. Before we end, the organizer, the president of that organization asked the ambassador, said, please, Mr. Ambassador, would you like to share something before we call it a night? And the ambassador got up and he said, of course he cannot say he agrees with me, right? He's a diplomat. So he said, well, a lot of the things that Mr. Chen say, I think it's worthy of our considering. But we in China have long decided that we don't want to be number one, because it's very expensive. I thought to myself, you're right. Moreover, you can never be number one. You don't have the political system, you don't have the military, you don't have the science, you don't have the rigor of research in your universities and many other things. But that doesn't matter. He's an ambassador, so he had to say the politically correct thing, right? So he said, we don't want to be number one. The best position to be in is number 3 or number 4. But we got up one morning and suddenly found out we're number 2. And we found out that it's a very dangerous position, because you turn to the right, the number 1 will slap you. And you turn to the left, the number 1 will slap you. And he sat down. He's right. He got a point. He got a point. And so China would much rather stay below the radar screen as far as being the number 1 is concerned. Do you know who sends more peacekeeping forces in the world today, number 1? Who sends the most?
China.
China. So they are doing something. So I think that China will be happy to have America be the number 1.
I have another question coming from the public. You've mentioned China's desire to become a respected member of the international community. How would you describe China's approach to becoming respected? Where do you see obstacles in this goal, to this goal?
Well, obviously, China at this stage is concentrating on economics rather than political. So if China were to help many African countries, for example, develop, instead of plundering them like the European countries, helping them develop, buy from them. You have a problem with colonialism? That part of the history is too it hurts too much to remember. Germany is not the worst. You just have a little bit of issue. A lot of other people have a lot more issue than you do in Africa and in Asia. And so China is just trading with them. And in the process, they are helping them with a model that perhaps will work to economically develop their own country. You help enough of them, you'll be respected by somebody.
This is the example you already mentioned some minutes ago, is Africa. Is there anything else to become a respectful member?
Besides
Africa.
How about Latin America? How about a lot of the other smaller countries around the world? There are many issues in the world today. And I think that China can collaborate with the United States. You know, when people start talking about G2, I told my friends, I said, China would never accept G2. They don't like that conception at all. But like it or not, the reality is, today, no serious problem in the world can be resolved without the United States and China agreeing on it. Be it money laundering, be it nuclear proliferation, be it environment, sustainability issues, right? So like it or not, we are entering into a world where the United States and China are the two major players. To be politically correct, let me add in EU and India and Japan and a few others. But to be brutally frank, those two countries have to work together. And so the question is, would the United States want China to be a friend or a foe? You want it to be a foe, you have a foe. You want it to have a friend, you have a friend. So far, I think America is moving in the wrong direction.
Mm-hmm. We are approaching the end, but I would like to speak with you about your native city, Hong Kong, which has been in the news for a long time now. Why is China undermining the one country, two systems principle in Hong Kong? Why is it arresting leaders of students' protest movement? Why is there no freedom of speech as there used to be?
You know, you guys really don't know the facts.
Okay.
We heard that before.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know that under the Brits, if any newspaper were to criticize the British government, you would not be invited to the next government press conference?
You would perhaps not be arrested.
Do you know that nobody's arrested in Hong Kong because of that?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Do you know that they tapped telephones before 1997 by the British regularly? Even the list of names came up. One of them is on my board. So you think the Brits are saints? Think twice. I fault China for not abiding by the basic law, not because they are too tight, because they are absolutely way too loose. They did not abide by the basic law because they have a policy. The best way to manage Hong Kong is to not manage it. 不管就是管好. Just let it go. Let them manage themselves. Although the basic law demand that they play a certain role, they didn't. And so, you have all those things that are happening. Do you know that the press freedom today is far more freer than it was under the Brits? You don't know that because you don't believe it. You read Chinese?
Why is it then, for example, one of the activists of the students' movement, Joshua Wong, wasn't allowed to speak at the Asia Society?
Good question. Thank you for asking. Asia Society, of which I'm the global chair until November 1st last year, we never invited anybody to talk about domestic politics. We're a political organization. We never invited any pro-government legislator to speak. So why should we invite any anti-government legislator to speak? I don't want to be accused of being one-sided. Mm-hmm. We never invited anybody pro or against the Hong Kong government. So why do you force me, or the general public force me, to accept only those who are anti-Hong Kong government or anti-Beijing?
But do you understand these young students and their protests? And do you have any any sympathy with them for demanding a more open and free society. And
let me tell you what happened. What do you think will happen if, when the mainland Chinese soccer team play the Hong Kong soccer team and the national anthem is played and the flag of China is hoisted? You have 50 college students turning their back from the flag and showing the middle finger. Is that what you mean by freedom? Is that what you mean by freedom?
you know what I mean by freedom.
That's the group of young people. Is it right to turn your back against the national flag and raise your, I don't want to do it, okay? Not this finger, but another one. When the national anthem is being played?
There are other things in the United States where football players are also doing things when the national anthem is played, and this is possible. I mean, you have... if you
America is not the standard.
Yes.
China doesn't have to go by the American standard.
Mm-hmm. But perhaps...
Why do you want the Chinese to go according to the American standard? Mm-hmm. They can burn flags. Mm-hmm. Some countries you cannot burn flags. Mm-hmm. What makes you think that America allowing people to burn the national flag is the only way to go?
Okay.
I think let's have a full stop here and ask one final question, Ronnie. You told us about your track record, your very good track record of predicting who is the new generation in the Chinese leadership earlier on.
A lot of people can do that. I'm not the only one.
But you can. So the question I would like to ask you is, the current Chinese president and Secretary General of the Communist Party in China, Xi Jinping, has acquired an enormous amount of power. Do you think that he's gonna relinquish that power in 2022?
I don't know. Will Angela Merkel run again?
Probably not.
She was just re-elected.
Just re-elected. How many terms can Angela Merkel serve? As many terms as she can win, right? So why are you asking that question?
It's of interest, because he's an important guy.
Right. So what if he serves another 10 years? He'll be matching or coming close to Angela Merkel, huh?
It would be indicative of how the Chinese system functions, or...
The Chinese system is not a very rigid, institutionalized system. It's evolving very fast. Mm-hmm. And as time goes on, the Chinese system will no doubt have to evolve even more. So whether he serves another 5 years, whether he serves another 10 years, I don't know. What do I know? And frankly, I'm not that concerned. People say, he has a lot of power. I said, only people who don't know about China think he has a lot of power. Is the chief executive of Hong Kong right now his choice? I don't know. I suspect not. He has to compromise as well. Moreover, how do you deal with corruption, which is rife in China in the last 30 years? How do you deal with corruption in a system which for 3,000 years was not a rule-based, law-based society, rather it's an ethics-based society? How do you do it? How can you deal with corruption in China without a strong leader? So conceptually, my American friend, my Western friends have a problem with a guy being powerful. From a very pragmatic perspective, I say without the power, he can never deal with corruption. And I mean, look at this guy. He arrested 2 out of the 3 vice chairmen of the Central Military Commission, with himself being the chair. Now this guy got gall. He got if he doesn't have enough power, he could never do that. I know what you're thinking. Absolute power, corrupt, absolutely. I know that. But damn if you do, damn if you don't. So what are you going to do? Allow the corruption to continue on and on and on and on? They know that will be detrimental to the party. So for themselves and for the country and for the people, for everybody, they better do something about it. And so I said the last 5 years, the one whose life is the most wanted, you know, a price to your head, is probably his head. Because he has offended not offended, he has scared so many corrupt government officials. So I say, I'm a pragmatic guy, I'm a businessman. You do what is necessary to move the society in a way that will give the biggest number of people the better livelihood.